All right, if you're watching this video and you're thinking about moving to Portland, you've probably seen some other pros and cons videos on the internet about moving to Portland and what it's like to live here, but we all know that it rains. We all know the weather can be miserable sometimes. We all know there's great food here. In this video, we're going to give you some pros and cons that maybe you haven't heard before. All that starts now. Hey, what's up everybody? This is Paul Clem and Seth Marchant with the Home Team Brokers coming to you from Portland, Oregon today. And if this is your first time to the channel living in Oregon and you want to get more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the little bell to get notified every time we drop a new video. We've helped so many people relocate to Oregon and move to the Portland metro area. And as real estate professionals, we love to help with that process. So if that's you, give us a call, send us a text, shoot us an email, or click the link down below in the description of the video and schedule a Zoom call with us. Either way, we would love to help with your move to the Portland area.
All right, so how about we start with the cons first? If you're thinking about moving to Portland, you probably already know what a lot of the pros are. You're probably not watching the video to figure out what those pros are. So let's start with the cons and let's find some things that people might not know about or haven't heard about before in other videos. First con, allergies.
Yeah.
If you have allergies, the Willamette Valley is actually one of the worst places in the United States, maybe the world. I'm not sure, but definitely in the United States.
I've heard the world.
You've heard the
but
world?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And as somebody that has allergies, I can testify to that. It can be very bad here. And so if that's something that's maybe not on the radar, you might not even know that you're allergic to was it typically pollen?
Yeah.
You might not even know you're allergic until you come here. So not a huge thing that you hear a lot about, but it is something that's sort of a nuisance and definitely a con for some people every springtime when that sneezing starts.
Yeah, this is the grass seed capital of the world. And my whole life I've known people who, right around springtime, even late winter, as the season's starting to change a little bit, those allergies start coming out. I'm lucky enough to not have them.
All right, next on the list, next con. This is going to be a new one. Again, you probably won't hear about this one too much. If you're from California, you're probably familiar with this, but wildfires. We do have wildfires in Oregon, but wildfires in the Portland metropolitan area up until recently was a new thing. I don't think I ever recall growing up in the Portland metro area and ever seeing wildfire smoke, whereas 2 years ago, it was so bad that we actually had to evacuate. We had to leave, and I remember going to Home Depot. Everybody's buying.
Yeah, you get the box fan with
right.
Put the filter on it.
Yeah, everybody's taping filters to box fans, so you couldn't find filters for your house for like months because they were all sold out everywhere. So that was definitely a big con. And if you're somebody, and that kind of maybe ties into allergies. If you're somebody that is really sensitive to smoke, that might be something for you to consider. It's not something that looks like it's gonna go away anytime soon or something that necessarily was just like a random event. We've had a lot longer summers, which has been great here in Portland. Our summer this year kind of went to like mid-October, whereas normally summers kind of end like early September around school time. That's when the rain really starts to come in, whereas now less rain, longer summers also creates opportunity for wildfires. And, that's when we need that rain to come back and put those fires out. So the wildfires, we've had a couple the last couple of years that have impacted the Portland metro area. Definitely a big con.
All right, next on the list are protests and demonstrations. So, of course, political protests, people speaking their mind, freedom of speech, that's all great for sure. Portland has a very long history of political activism, dating back the last 100 years. And over the past decades, there's always been, some years more than others, some kind of political demonstrations, sometimes protests, and sometimes that can lead to rioting. So, sometimes these things can escalate where there's violence, where you have different groups that are pitted against each other. That's something that has definitely calmed down in the last couple of years, especially compared to what you saw in 2020. But the fact that this has been kind of an ongoing tradition and part of the culture of Portland, there's going to be days in the summertime where you want to go hit the town, you want to go maybe hit a couple breweries, have, you know, enjoy the sunshine, but you can't go downtown because there's this big demonstration going on. So, you know, I mean, growing up the past couple decades and beyond, you know, this has been something where, again, some years it's worse than others, but, you know, if you look at the history of protests and demonstrations in Portland, certainly something that will continue to happen to some degree in the future.
Yeah, certainly respect anybody's constitutional right, you know, to protest. But like you mentioned, in Portland, oftentimes protest can turn into breaking windows, lighting stuff on fire, blocking traffic, you know, all of those things. Obviously a huge safety factor. And people blocking traffic has caused accidents or caused second order effects that led to people getting hurt. So that's a great point on the protests, you know, / riots. That's something that is probably something you might experience at some point in the future, you know, just given Portland's history. All right, next on the list we have traffic.
Yeah, you know, Portland is known for having bad traffic. It definitely has some of the worst traffic in the country when you look at the size of the city versus how long the commute times can be, especially in some areas. Some more than others, but really during rush hour in the morning and especially in the evening. And sometimes at noon on a Saturday, traffic can be really bad. Not to mention that Allstate Insurance in the last couple of years ranked Portland as having the worst drivers in the country. So you put those things together, bad traffic, bad drivers, it can be tough out there on the roads.
Yeah, I think especially if you're coming from California, you're definitely going to notice a different driving style from people in Oregon. It's not really a concept of a passing lane here. People here refer to it as a fast lane. And I think psychologically, the problem with that is if somebody thinks, well, I'm going 3 miles an hour over the speed limit, I need to be in that fast lane. That's where I belong, is over in the fast lane. And, you know, without having a concept of an actual passing lane, you know, where you drive in the center lane, when you encounter a car, if you're going faster than that car, you get in the passing lane, then you get back over again. You just don't see that a ton in Oregon. In fact, sometimes you'll see people get on an on-ramp and they'll go straight to the far left lane, the passing lane. Even if there's nobody in the center lane, they just go straight, you know, because they think, hey, I'm going over the speed limit, I drive in the fast lane. So that causes a lot of traffic and congestion. But another thing that you're gonna be on the lookout for in 2023 and going forward, which is when we're shooting this is January of 2023. So we wanna give you the most up-to-date information. One thing that's a big talk of Portland right now, especially people that are using I-205, is tolls. So ODOT, the Oregon Department of Transportation, is putting in place tolls in 2 places on I-205. The first is going to be over the Abernathy Bridge that goes over the Willamette River, and then the next is going to be just north of that goes over the bridge that goes over the Tualatin River. And so the big problem with tolls, you know, we're not used to tolls around here, but you know, the big concern with the tolls is going to be increased congestion in just residential areas.
People cutting through neighborhoods.
Yeah, so we anticipate that people will avoid those tolls and they'll take, you know, they'll go through neighborhoods to do so, and that's going to create a lot more congestion in these towns, specifically Oregon City and West Linn. But there's been talks that those tolls are going to expand all across Portland, mostly using that money supposedly for repairs on bridges such as the Abernathy Bridge. They are adding an extra lane to that bridge, and they're also updating that bridge to be compliant with whatever code they need for earthquakes.
Yeah.
So the tolling is a big, probably a big con for I think just about anybody. I don't know anybody that is excited about that method to collect money in order to pay for some of these repairs and these lanes that we're adding onto our roads. So that's something that you can definitely watch out for in 2023, and probably it sounds like beyond. I've heard people say too that this will be sunset, and there will be some sort of legislation that sunsets, you know, this tolling, so eventually it will end. But I've heard from a lot of other people that live in states that have a lot of tolls, like New Jersey, for example, and you know, they claim that historically that never happens. You know, whenever there's talk of you know, it being temporary,
once you open that door, it's not getting shut, right? You're probably just going to have more and more.
Right. I think there's a saying. I think Milton Friedman said, "There's nothing as permanent as a temporary government, you know, plan or bill or legislation or something like that. So we don't expect the tolls to be temporary as they are, saying they might be.
All right, next on the list, we have crime. So there's going to be different dynamics depending on where you're at in the Portland metro area. Obviously, in more suburban areas, crime is less of an issue than it is in more urban areas. That's going to hold true in metro areas around the country. In Portland and in Multnomah County, you have property crime being over twice the national average, and the violent crime is right at about the national average. So even being right at the national average, that's not great. When you look at Clackamas County and Washington County out in the suburbs, the property crime is about right at about the national average as well. So it's definitely the case where there are areas, even outside of Portland and the city limits, where you might be up against higher instances of crime, but there's definitely areas, of course, where you can avoid it too.
Yeah, growing up in Portland and having spent time all across Portland, I know all of Portland very well. I don't think there was a time growing up where I ever really felt uncomfortable or unsafe. Whereas now, there's probably quite a few places that you can go in Multnomah County specifically, not as much Clackamas or Washington County. You can kind of find stuff everywhere, but specifically Multnomah County, where you maybe don't feel so comfortable, you don't feel so safe. And we hear that from other people too. That's not just us. We hear that from people that have lived here their entire lives, as well as people that move here too. We had some buyers recently that didn't move here. They flew here and they were staying in a hotel, and they one of them flew here, the other one had a U-Haul. And what do you think happens in Portland and Multnomah County when you park a U-Haul, in the parking lot of a hotel?
Well, it depends on where.
Yeah, but it depends on where. But and lo and behold, it got broken into their very first day here in Oregon. That type of story is not super uncommon over the past couple of years. Again, go back a couple years before that, crime just really wasn't that bad. So record homicides last year, which broke the record from the year before in 2021. Hopefully there's something that it feels like the tide is turning a little bit. Another thing to piggyback on the crime, the Portland police situation is also not the best. They've struggled to recruit and keep enough officers to where they can actually respond to calls in a timely manner. We hear some complaints about people not getting the police to respond to them for hours if it's not like a priority 1 or priority 2, meaning like if your life is not in danger. Sometimes in Multnomah County you might have to wait for the police to show up a little bit, just because they just don't have the police to respond to all the calls. So the crime and police situation, definitely a con in Portland, although I would say that things have ticked up a little bit recently, and it looks like people are kind of starting to take some steps to rectify that.
Yeah, I mean, you have, especially after 2020, there was a lot of calls to defund the police. The police department in Portland was defunded a bit, and I think the sentiment overall, all the overtime with the riots, the way police were being treated, the public perception of police led to a lot of officers retiring or resigning.
Yeah.
There were some layoffs. So you look at really a national uptick in crime in the last couple of years, and a police force that's been depleted a little bit over the last couple of years, especially.
Yeah.
That's not a good recipe.
Yeah, and it probably feels like the contrast probably feels stark in Portland, because we went from, like I said, a place to where I don't think most people are going to feel unsafe. A relatively safe, clean town that you can kind of go anywhere and not kind of feel threatened, whereas now there's a fair amount of places you can go and not feel so comfortable. So that contrast from before, feels like a big difference. For other big cities like LA or maybe Chicago, crime upticks, maybe you don't even know the difference. But we definitely noticed the difference here in Portland. But again, I think that they are taking the steps to fix that.
Yep. All right, next on the list are the taxes. So there's definitely a benefit living in Oregon because we have no sales tax, something you've probably heard. There is a relatively high income tax, one of the highest in the country for state income tax. So those things do definitely offset. Property taxes are not super high. It depends on where you are. So in the Portland metro area, Washington County and Clackamas County and the suburbs, property taxes are going to be a little bit less than in Multnomah County, being closer into the city. So those are things that we've talked about in other videos, and we can link to that. But when you look at taxes overall, definitely higher than the majority of the United States. You know, I think in the top 5 consistently when you look at all taxes across the board. And living in Multnomah County, so if you're living in Portland and Portland city limits, there are some new taxes because there was just universal pre-K, which was voted in and I believe goes into effect next year. And that's supported by a new income tax in Multnomah County, 1% for every $125,000 or $200,000 if you're married filing jointly. And there's an additional tax for housing services for homelessness, services to combat homelessness, that's 1.5% on $125,000 or more, or $200,000 if you're married filing jointly. So I've talked to a lot of people in the last year that really like some neighborhoods in Portland. You know, they're moving up, they're moving into, you know, their next house, you know, making, you know, taking big steps, and, you know, their dream was to live in this neighborhood or that neighborhood in Portland, and they're really reconsidering that because of that new tax.
Yeah, and I think it goes up 0.8% in 2026. So
the state income tax.
Yeah. So, you know, tack on extra almost $1,000 for every 100 grand. It's not nothing. So definitely something that people are taking into consideration when they're moving.
All right, last on our list for cons is it's not easy being a sports fan in the Portland area. And yes, we have the Portland Trailblazers, we have the Portland Timbers, the Major League Soccer. There are, you know, avid fan bases here in Portland, and people really do get into sports. But the Pacific Northwest, Portland in particular, really tends to get overlooked. You know, it's really hard to get free agents for sports. You know, we don't get a ton of notoriety. Playing on the West Coast overall, you know, we're kicking off football games at, you know, 11 p.m. East Coast time. You know, we're not gonna get a lot of people, you know, watching those things. So, you know, we can pretend like, you know, it's a great sports town, and I think you could argue that it is because people get really into it. But the breadth of what we have isn't great.
Yeah, that's the best thing about sports, I think, is the people here, whether it's high school, college, or professional sports. Up until the pandemic, Blazer games were sold out every game for years. If you ever went to a Portland Winterhawks game, they're awesome. The fans that go to the Portland Timbers games are awesome. But it feels like nationally, when you're a sports fan of one of these teams, whether it's college or professional, you sort of notice, and this isn't a reason why anybody wouldn't move here, but you kind of notice the Pacific Northwest doesn't get the same love that a lot of other sports teams do. You know, and there's a lot of anecdotes like Dame Lillard being snubbed for the All-Star game, you know, one year, when he's clearly one of the best players in the NBA.
Yeah.
Or just us, you know, the Blazers struggling to, you know, land like big names and bring big names. You know, we've been fortunate to have like a Damian Lillard that's been willing to stay here for so long. It's been like 10 years, I think he's been here now.
Yeah.
But you do kind of notice, like, we don't have a football team, so a lot of people tend to root for like the Seahawks. You've got that vibe a little bit with the Seahawks, even though they've done well kind of in the past decade, in that nationally we just are a little bit overlooked as far as sports, as far as rankings, as far as people wanting to come here. When you go to a sporting event here, it's great. The people are great, but just like being a sports fan, it's like, you know, we always feel like we don't get ranked quite as high as maybe some of those like East Coast teams. So it's just a little bit annoying.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a campaign going on for quite a while. It's been quiet in the last couple of years to bring MLB to Portland. That really looks like a possibility. I mean, who knows, as the NFL maybe expands in the coming years and decades, maybe, you know, we could get an NFL team. But for now, I mean, yes, the Blazers play 7 months out of the year. You know, a lot of people like to go to Timbers games. There's just not that much offered. But, you know, back to what we were saying, for example, a couple months ago, I was at a Blazer game and I sat next to a couple that was from Charlotte, and we were kind of chatting it up throughout the game. And I think into the second quarter, the game started to get a little bit more contested and got a little more exciting. And the crowd was like on their feet and cheering, and the place was really loud. And they were like, I haven't heard, you know, back in Charlotte, you know, maybe at a playoff game it would be this loud, but this is like a Tuesday night, you know, in the second quarter, and people are going nuts. So
yeah, I've heard that from other people too. I think in Oregon, whether it's college or football or even high school, we have some of the best fans, but on a national level when we're comparing ourselves to others, it always feels like we're slightly overlooked.
Yeah.
All right, how about some pros? So again, we wanted to keep this like to something that maybe you haven't heard. You know, the food's here amazing, you know, that's no need to put that on the list. Here's one that sometimes that we actually hear that Oregonians maybe don't think about much, but we hear from people coming from outside of the state. A pro is that we don't have really terrible bugs.
Yeah.
So, you know, mosquitoes or, you know, I don't know, I don't even know what that means actually when people say, when people say that. But when you think about it, yeah, the bugs are not terrible here. Whether you're talking about mosquitoes or like termites, some sort of invasive, you know, species or bug or something like that. Bugs are not bad here, and probably why we don't really think about it here. You know, so when people come from places where bugs are bad, maybe like the South or something, it's noticeable to them. Us as Oregonians, maybe we enjoy not having to think about not having you know, bad bug problems.
Yeah, a little bit of ants. You know, people get ants at their house.
Springtime ants.
I mean, yeah, you can get in the summer some mosquitoes, but other than that, you're really not worrying about it too much. So
yeah, no bugs here.
All right, next on the list is the affordability. And something you'll hear us talk about is Portland is the most affordable major city on the West Coast. So when you look at housing in particular, you know, Portland, the median sale price right now, in Portland proper at least, is about $510,000. You have to look to Seattle for the next on the list being $775,000, and San Diego is about $780,000. LA is going to be over $900,000. San Francisco is going to be like $1.3 million. I think it was 1.1 million. Still over a million.
It was probably 1.3 a month ago.
Yeah, well, that's true. Still, median sale price being up over $1 million in San Francisco. So, when you look at those numbers and compare them to median household income, too, Portland not only has the most affordable kind of sticker price for houses, but also as an affordability ratio, also, you know, it's going to be one of the most affordable places to buy a house on the West Coast. And across the board, Portland is going to be lower in terms of cost of living, more affordable than other markets on the West Coast.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's an easy choice if you're looking for affordability on the West Coast. And you're not too far from Seattle if you have family there. And, you know, you can take a quick flight to the Bay Area, you know, so affordability, relatively not bad.
All right, next on the list, we have the job market. So really big industries here in the Portland area. You have apparel and tech and manufacturing. The labor market has been growing about 6 times the national average. I think in 2021, there were 7 job seekers for every 10 job openings. I think in last year, or at the end of 2022, there was 100,000 or a little over 100,000 job openings in the Portland metro area. So if you are moving to Portland, likely you might have a job, or you're moving here, you know, for employment, but maybe your spouse, you know, maybe your kids need to get a job, and that's something that you're, you know, going to be looking for. Portland has a great job market right now.
Yeah, a lot of great jobs, a lot of high-paying jobs. We've got Nike here, Intel, Boeing, Adidas, Columbia, so many different companies to work for here. So job market, a big pro for Portland. All right, next on the list, the airport. We actually have, if you haven't been before, one of the best airports in the country. I think it's actually been rated by, you know, whoever, #1 in the country, at least a few times in the past.
Yeah, you'll see it on lists, like top 10 lists. And you'll see it in the top 10 consistently, in the top 5 pretty often, and it's actually been ranked the best airport in the country a handful of times.
And they're currently doing a massive remodel and expansion on it too, so it's going to get even better. I don't recall when the completion date is for that, but going on right now, should be completed here in the next few years. Yeah, the airport's great because, you know, the location, really anywhere you are in the Portland metro area, you're going to be probably no more than 45 minutes depending on traffic. Now, if you're all the way out in Sherwood or way out in Hillsboro, or even deep into like Tigard, down in Wilsonville, I mean, there's going to be areas where it's going to be further. But either way, the location is relatively convenient for most people. Good, yeah. And you go through the airport, and all of the restaurants in the airport are local restaurants, so locally owned. Yeah. So they might have a location in downtown Portland, or
in Southeast Portland or Northeast Portland, and they have their little satellite location at the airport. So the food offering is probably as good as it gets compared to any other airport in the country.
Yeah, good point about the food. I mean, you don't see that too much in other cities, right? These days it's a lot of the fast food. There might be one worker, you know, it's automated. You just type in your order on a touch screen. Whereas Portland, we actually have some of our most popular restaurants that actually have restaurants, you know, with real people that serve you in the airport. So, and I would say too, it feels pretty efficient too. For me personally, I haven't run into too many bad lines. It usually feels like things are pretty efficient at PDX.
Yeah.
Too.
You can get in and out pretty quick, and the long-term parking, the short-term parking is really convenient. If you do the long-term parking, you have to get a shuttle, but I know at some airports you have to go like, you know, maybe on a 20-minute shuttle ride to get there. At PDX, it's right there. It's super easy. Yeah.
All right, next pro. We got a couple more pros here. So one big con that we've had over the last few years is the urban camping. People camping on streets, on sidewalks has caused a lot of problems. Certainly we feel for those people. You know, those people are struggling and they need help. But allowing them to camp anywhere they want has caused problems for people with disabilities. Has caused problems with the environment. There's a lot of places around the Portland metro area that's basically just been destroyed due to people camping and just leaving out trash and doing all that kind of stuff. But the city recently announced that they have an 18-month plan to ban camping, to create new areas where if people do want to camp, they can go, and also to expand shelters and beds for those people as well too. So that's there's been maybe a change in sentiment, whereas a year ago it was kind of like, well, Ted Wheeler himself, our mayor said, we're not going to tell people they can't camp in Portland. We're not going to tell people they can't camp essentially wherever they want. Whereas now the message is we are telling people you can't camp in Portland. We're going to take care of you. You're going to have somewhere else to go, but there's no more camping wherever you want. So I think that is really good news for most people, homeowners, business owners, just people that like to frequent there, people with disabilities that couldn't use the sidewalk because there was no sidewalks to use. So we definitely welcome that and anticipate that situation getting a lot better in the next couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of contradictions baked into how things were, being handled, or really the lack of how things were being handled. All the trash, for example, Portland is a leader nationally in sustainability. We're known for being an eco-friendly, green place, green living. That's a big part of the lifestyle here for a lot of people. And, allowing these huge encampments with trash, burning a lot of stuff.
Feces.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of those things really kind of went against, that, sustainability that the city tends to strive for. And letting people do what they want, had been kind of the sentiment. Whereas now, as things kind of continued to, get more and more out of control, it's going to help with crime, the open drug use. It's going to help with a lot of things. So I think it's the plan that the city of Portland has come up with, I think is really welcomed by all, in terms of, people have different opinions on these things, but it's not just totally punitive in outlawing people from camping, but it's also met with, providing temporary shelter and housing, building more affordable housing, counseling, rehabilitation. So it's pretty robust. And honestly, that's why this long, this issue that's kind of been long plaguing Portland, and you would typically see this on a list of cons, is now mentioned on a list of pros.
Right.
All right, next on the list, we have the options for living. So in the Portland metro area, there's going to be a lot of different options for the type of area that you can live in. And of course, in Portland, within Portland city limits, you have all of the quirky Portland neighborhoods, the Keep Portland Weird, Portlandia type places that you've probably heard about or maybe have seen or experienced at some point. You can definitely get that. There's a lot of options for kind of more urban style living. But there's also a ton of great suburbs. And within, 15-20 miles of downtown Portland, you can get a lot of areas that are going to be a little bit more rural too.
Yeah.
So the Portland metro area really offers different types of places for everybody, you know, no matter what you would be looking for.
That's pretty much close to everything. You know,
Yeah.
It's not a huge place, so whether you're urban or suburban or rural, you're probably not going to be far away from everything. We do have a video on that if you want to watch our video, urban versus suburban versus rural. But yeah, Portland is probably unique in that you have a lot of different choices. If you want to be somewhere that's a little bit rural but not super outside of the city, you can actually find that in Portland.
Yeah, Portland has one of the strictest urban growth boundaries in the country, and it's not expanded very often. And even when it is expanded, you know, going through the steps of, you know, getting the permitting and planning for the developments, you know, a lot of that takes time. So, you know, as a consequence of that, you don't have to go very far in any direction to get out of town.
All right, so that makes up all of our pros and cons. If we could give you one last con to go off of, you know, as realtors, we would love to have some more inventory.
Yeah.
We're actually in a new subdivision in Bull Mountain right now. You might hear some houses being built right behind us as we speak, but there's not enough houses. There's not enough inventory. Now, I know that's true in a lot of places throughout the country. It's especially true in Portland. So it can be tough to find the right place that you want. And that's where Paul and I come in. If you're somebody that's thinking about moving, if you're worried about inventory, if you're worried about figuring out where the right place is for you, urban, suburban, rural, something like that, that's where we come in. You can call us, text us, email us. And if you're coming from out of town, which a lot of people watching this video are, you can always click the link below in the description if you want to hop into our calendar and schedule a Zoom call with us. And if this video helped you, give us a like. It lets us know we're doing a good job. You can feel free to comment too. We'll respond back. And if you want to see more videos like this and see some more takes and some more opinions that you might not find elsewhere on the internet, make sure and hit the subscribe button and tap the bell. That way you'll be notified every time we drop a new video, which is every week.
Hey, we really appreciate you watching as always. Until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Take care, everyone.